The Piano Lesson. As he flipped the wall switch and the overhead fluorescence blinked on in the kitchen, a shiny cockroach the size of his big toe scurried across the tile. This startled Henry. He was tiptoeing barefooted and bleary-eyed on his way to the coffee pot. He did his best to stay quiet in the early morning. Between the hours of 3 and 6 a.m., he had the house to himself, and this was the only time he felt somewhat comfortable. He stopped in his tracks and watched with bemused fascination as the armored creature disappeared into the pantry. Could this be the place he called home? The bottoms of his feet stuck to the linoleum, and as he proceeded to peel up his right foot, the plastic tile lifted as well. It was late August, and the heat wave was merciless. The only time it was even bearable indoors was before dawn, as the mid-century tract home had never been equipped with AC. This was part of the reason for rising in the dark. He filled the aluminum coffee pot with tap water, and the pipes groaned. This sent a jolt through his body. He wandered around the musty house while the Folgers percolated. The place was a dilapidated Salvation Army museum. Every surface, including the floor, seemed to be littered with forgotten memories. A marvelous labyrinth of music paraphernalia and bric-a-brac from yesteryear to explore. Floor-to-ceiling haphazard bookshelves sagged from the weight of swing-era fake books and outdated music encyclopedias. Dog-eared sheet music was piled everywhere. Countless unframed photographs of the same free-spirited woman in a variety of period hairdos, playing in a variety of groups, were thumbtacked and scotch-taped up. A dust-caked macrame from the 1960s with beads reading, "Musicians Duet Better," hung from the entrance to the piano room. The orange shag had deep worn spots below the baby grand pedals. A broken-down electric Hammond organ set in one corner under more hanging macrame, and wire suspending artificial flower arrangements and neglected plants, some of them dead, all laced with cobwebs. Psychedelic drip paintings adorned the walls. Brightly colored beanbags sat squashed and collecting dust. There was a trail beaten into the ratty shag. A narrow aisle traversing through the confusion of piles allowed him to get from one side of the house to the other. Upon arrival at Hippie House, he was greeted by fresh-cut yellow roses on his nightstand in a ceramic vase decorated with peace signs. Next to the flowers sat a package of Trojan condoms, placed conspicuously by the bedside. The next order of business was his morning cigarette. The nicotine bell had gone off in his head like clockwork. As the coffee pot gurgled, he unlocked the deadbolt on the rusted metal security gate which hung before the front door. It was that kind of neighborhood. He thought of it as a fortress, a variation on the gated community theme, he mused, each time the lock clinked shut. Henry was lucky to be there. When he lit his morning cigarette, he couldn't help thinking about Jennifer. In his mind's eye, he could still see the stunning young girl sitting in the car across from him. Desert sunrise backlighting her long silk blonde hair. Drawing a Camel light from above her right ear, she asked, "Mind if I smoke?" in a scratchy voice. Before he could answer, she lit up and took a deep drag with a kind of hunger. Tilting back her head, she exhaled blue plumes that seemed to hang there in the shafts of sunlight streaming in the window. He could hardly look at her. They had met through his estranged younger sister, Hilma. Jennifer had met Hilma at Mannequin Modeling School and remained in contact. When Brother Henry had agreed to lift Jennifer to the Dallas airport a few years ago, it was all over. He had never recovered from the trip, nor did he want to. Although it was less than a 5-minute trip with no more than 10 words spoken between them, the experience would come to dominate Henry's inner life. He wrote love letters to her constantly, love letters with limericks and songs, poems. He also drew pictures of her to accompany his poetry. Truth be told, Henry was not dealing in reality. Jennifer could not have been less interested. She never gave their encounter a second thought. He had not been with a woman in over 20 years and was now well into middle age. His heart would beat like a tom-tom every time the cell phone rang. She had called him once and once only. That was enough. He had nearly passed out from sheer excitement. He remembered how the morning light played on her fabulous face, the slight scent of coconut that lingered in his Hyundai after he dropped her. The newspaper dropped on the front driveway with a thud and brought him back to the present. Henry extinguished the morning smoke in a soda pop can hidden in the side yard and proceeded to creep back in. He opened the front door ever so carefully to avoid any possibility of creaking. He caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the black kitchen window on his way to the coffee pot. He almost didn't recognize himself. The dark circles under the eyes, the gaunt, drawn face with bristled turkey neck gave him the look of a Dust Bowl migrant from a Dorothea Lange photo. What had happened to the handsome young man in the high school senior portrait? The curly-headed lad with a bow tie and cummerbund with so much promise. This is the way Henry thought of himself today. He studied the haggard face in the blackness of the window for a moment, but had to look away. He had been at Hippie House for the whole summer. The arrangement was originally for him to stay 1 week. He could not seem to find paying work. No one wanted to hire a middle-aged man with no work history, try as he might. He'd been to the barber shop and invested $9 in a second-hand outfit for interviews. Pouring himself a cup of Folgers and mixing in the swirling coffee mate, he sat down at a wobbly Formica table and opened up the newspaper. He skimmed the want ads. He needed a plan of action. The door hinge creaked down the hall and sandals slapped on the tile. "Top of the morning. There's our lady of the hour," Henry said cheerfully as he circled a want ad in the Times. Mildred appeared under the flickering fluorescent. The sandals scuffed across the kitchen linoleum. Her eyes twinkled as she garbled, "Good morning," with a mouthful of Colgate. She crossed to the sink, removed the toothbrush, and spat. She wore a wild tumbleweed of silver curls and tried to conceal her bald spot with a sporty visor. She dressed in thrift store clothing, often a floral blouse, topped off by a scarf complete with sparkles, and black spandex stretch pants were her favorite. This was her uniform. Her lipstick was misapplied over pancake makeup. Mildred had the look of a flamboyant transvestite. The clock struck 6, and the screeching sound effect of some indiscernible bird sang out. This was a familiar sound at Hippie House. She had an inexpensive Taiwanese birdsong clock that made distorted screeches on the hour, every hour. This frazzled his nerves more and more with each screech. "You checking the want ads, Hank? Good for you. You'll find something. I'm optimistic. You know me." She proceeded to her refrigerator, where she opened the door looking puzzled for a moment, scratching her scalp under the visor. "You want a melted cheese sandwich?" She pulled out a loaf of Wonder and a brick of Velveeta. "Everyone is feeling the Bush economy. You're not alone, my boy. Those financial hooligans, they've ruined it for everyone. Greed. It has been without question the most spectacular failure in the history of American misadventure. After a decade marked by the waste of trillions of taxpayer dollars, not to mention tens of thousands of American lives, the disgraceful bankruptcy of our internally burglarized nation, and a consequent depression, Imperial America has nothing to show for the botched folly of its arrogant overreach but chaos. Unequivocal disasters in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. And now they tell us we're going to be beating the drum of war in Iran. Is there no end to this madness? Be kind to America, or we'll bring democracy to your country, too. A war on terror. Ha! That's a laugh. Lies. We're being lied to and propagandized every day. We are the biggest terrorists on Earth. Don't get me started, Hank.